I never imagined that at 55 years old, I'd be back in a classroom with a brand new notebook in my backpack and a pen I could barely hold properly, surrounded by young people who could be my children. The campus of Riverdale University, in Brookline, Massachusetts, just a few miles from the hustle of Boston, was a world I had left behind over 30 years ago. But there I was, Patricia Hayes, or Patty as everyone calls me, heart pounding, trying to rekindle a dream I had buried beneath diapers, bills, and sleepless nights. I grew up in the Boston suburbs, in a home where studying was a luxury. At 18, I dreamed of becoming an architect, designing homes with giant windows that seemed to embrace the sky. I started the program, my notebooks full of sketches and ideas that made me smile to myself. But life had other plans. At 20, I met James, my husband, an accountant with a kind smile and an obsession with spreadsheets. When I got pregnant with Jessica at 22, I dropped out of college. It's just for a while, I thought, rocking my daughter to sleep. 2 years later came Lucas, a boy who seemed born with the world in his eyes. And at 27, Olivia arrived. My youngest, born with respiratory issues that kept me up many nights in the hospital, holding her tiny hand. For 30 years, I was the backbone of our family. I woke up at 5 a.m. to make breakfast, took the kids to school, helped James with the finances for the accounting firm he started. When Olivia had asthma attacks, I stayed by her side, whispering that everything would be okay. When Jessica graduated, high school, I spent hours decorating a homemade cake for her party. And when Lucas dropped out of college to travel the world, I was the one who defended him, even when James slammed the table, saying he needed to get his act together. I always put others first. That's what mothers do, I'd say, with a smile that hid my exhaustion. But something shifted when I turned 50. We were having dinner when Olivia, now healthy and studying medicine, looked at me and asked, "Mom, you gave everything for us. But what about you? What do you want?" The question caught me off guard. I didn't know how to answer anymore. James, always buried in numbers, didn't understand why I was so restless. "We have a house, a good life, Patty. What's missing?" I couldn't explain it, but I felt an emptiness, like a part of me was still waiting, left behind in the past, to be rescued. That's when I decided to go back to school. Architecture felt like too big, too distant a dream. I chose interior design, something that still connected me to my passion for creating beautiful spaces, but seemed more achievable for a 55-year-old woman starting over. Riverdale University had a night program for adult students, perfect for me. James thought it was odd but shrugged. "If it makes you happy, fine. Just don't let the house fall apart." Jessica, Lucas, and Olivia were thrilled. "Go, Mom, nail those tests," Lucas wrote from somewhere in Thailand. The first few weeks at the university were a shock. I felt like a stranger among the young students, with their slang, earbuds, and phones flashing constantly. But I was stubborn. I showed up early, took notes on everything, asked questions. It was in art history class that I met Sarah Bennett, the professor everyone admired. Sarah, 48, had a commanding presence. Short gray hair, gold-rimmed glasses, and a voice that blended authority and warmth. She was a leading figure in sustainable design, featured in major magazines, and married to Philip Bennett, a prominent judge in Boston. I was surprised when she called me aside after class, praising a comment I'd made about a modernist project. "You have a unique perspective, Patty. It's not common in students, so new to academia," she said with a smile that made me feel at home. We started getting closer. Sarah was older than most professors and students like me, which created an instant bond. We'd have lunch together in the cafeteria, share ideas about design, laugh about how the university apps were a nightmare. I confided my fears about starting over. "Sometimes I think I'm crazy for being here at my age," I admitted, stirring my coffee. Sarah laughed. "Patty, you're braver than half these kids." She spoke passionately about her career, but was private about her personal life. She'd mention Philip in passing, saying things like, "He's always stuck in court." I didn't push, but I sensed she was hiding something. One night, after a long class, I stayed in the library going over notes. It was almost 10 p.m., and the campus was deserted, the Brookline air cutting cold. As I left, I passed the hallway near the restrooms and heard muffled voices, almost whispers. Curious, I peeked around the corner. The door to the women's restroom opened, and there was Sarah, looking around like she was afraid of being caught. Behind her came Rafael Lopez, a senior student with messy hair and a backpack slung over his shoulder. He was tall, with striking features, and looked tense. Sarah touched his arm, a quick, intimate gesture, and whispered something I couldn't hear. Rafael responded quietly, his gaze locked on her. They split quickly. She headed toward the parking lot, he in the opposite direction, as if they'd planned not to be seen together. I froze, heart in my throat. Sarah was married to a judge. Rafael was a student. At Riverdale, relationships between faculty and students were strictly forbidden. A scandal like that could destroy her career, tarnish Philip's reputation. I knew this because I'd read the university handbook. Conflict of interest rules were taken seriously. But seeing them, it seemed obvious. They were having an affair. The way Sarah touched his arm, Rafael's intense gaze, the whispers in an empty hallway. Everything screamed secrecy. Even the way Rafael adjusted his backpack with a half smile seemed to say he knew something no one else did. But as I walked back to my car, shivering in the cold, doubt started to creep in. Sarah didn't look in love. She looked scared, like she was carrying a burden. And Rafael, his look wasn't just one of desire. It was deeper, almost like he wanted something more from her, something beyond romance. I knew Sarah, at least a little. She was always so composed, so professional. Why would she risk everything for a student? And why did Rafael, whom I later overheard speaking Spanish with a friend in the courtyard, mentioning East Boston, seem so connected to her? When I got home, I found James on the couch. "Everything okay, Patty? You look—" I forced a smile. "Just tired." But I wasn't. My mind wouldn't stop. I had seen something I wasn't supposed to. And now? Tell someone? Ignore it? Or find out more? That night, lying in bed, I made a decision. I would pay closer attention to Sarah and Rafael. If they were having an affair, I needed to understand. Why? And if it wasn't an affair, then what was it? The image of them kept replaying in my mind, like a piece out of place. There was something there, something I didn't understand, yet. I've never been one to dwell on things. I always believed everyone has their own secrets and shadows, and that life is already complicated enough without dragging around someone else's baggage. But ever since that night in the university hallway, my mind kept circling back to that moment. Sarah and Rafael whispering, hiding, like they were sharing a secret that could bring everything crashing down. And me? I just wanted to rekindle an old dream, to go back to school, to rediscover myself. But now I couldn't stop watching them, trying to decode what I had seen. An affair? That's what it looked like. And even though it was none of my business, I cared too much about Sarah to just brush it off. She'd become important, a friend who believed in me. Someone who reminded me every single day that it's never too late to change your life, not even after 50. But I could feel it. She was playing with fire. And I wasn't sure who was in more danger. Her, me, or both of us. The days that followed were hectic. I buried myself in classes, exercises, and group projects, trying to convince myself I was overreacting, that none of it mattered. But Sarah had changed. She was quieter, more guarded. She avoided certain topics. She even started avoiding me. At lunch in the cafeteria, where we used to laugh like two teenagers on summer break, she now felt 1,000,000 miles away. One time, We were eating sandwiches out on the quad, the autumn wind scattering dry leaves around our feet, when her phone rang again and again. She looked at it and didn't answer. "Just spam," she said, too quickly. Then she looked away and pointed at my notebook. "Patty, are you coming to the Sustainable Design Workshop tomorrow? I want you on my team." "Of course I'm coming." I smiled, trying to hide the knot in my chest. Wouldn't miss it. But inside, the question kept pounding. What is she hiding? My friendship with Sarah was like sunlight streaming through a window I thought had been sealed shut forever. She saw me in a way even James, my husband, never did. To him, this whole going back to college phase was just a distraction, a late life adventure. Every night, he'd wait for me on the couch with the game on, barely glancing up when he asked, "You okay, Patty?" Sarah was different. She listened. She challenged me. At the workshop, we spent hours building models and prototypes. She praised my sketch of a sunlit room, looking at me like she saw something with real promise. "You've got talent, Patty. Seriously, you should present this at the campus festival." I laughed, a little embarrassed, hiding behind my ruler. But inside, something warmed. For the first time in ages, I felt capable. Then I saw Raphael at the door. He didn't come in. He just stood there, backpack hanging off one shoulder, dark hair slightly tousled. His eyes were locked on her. And when Sarah saw him, her whole body stiffened like she'd been shocked. "I'll be right back," she said, rushing out of the room. I tried to stay focused, but curiosity won. I got up and peeked through the window. They were just outside, near one of the old campus trees, where the fading afternoon light cast long shadows. Raphael spoke softly, his hands moving like someone asking for answers. Sarah touched his face, a gentle, intimate gesture, almost tender. Then she said something that made him shake his head. Slowly. My stomach twisted. It was an affair. The way she leaned in, the way he looked at her, like nothing else existed, it was obvious. It screamed secret. But then, she looked up and saw me. We froze. I think my heart stopped for a second. I ducked down, pretending to shuffle some papers, but I knew it was too late. She came back into the room with a strained smile. "Patty, you okay?" Her voice shook. Her eyes begged me to say nothing. "Yeah, just finishing this up," I mumbled, trying to sound normal, but my cheeks were burning. She hesitated. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "It's not what you think, Patty. Please." Before I could say anything, her phone lit up with a new message. She picked it up, read it quickly, and said she had to take care of something at the office. She left in a hurry. Raphael was already gone. I was alone in the room, heart pounding, trying to make sense of what had just happened. That's when I saw the paper. A small, scribbled note, tucked among her things. The handwriting wasn't hers. East Boston, Saturday, 7 p.m. East Boston. I remembered Raphael mentioning the neighborhood a few days earlier, speaking Spanish to a friend in the courtyard. Something about mi familia. I knew it was where the local Latino community gathered. Vibrant markets, restaurants with smells that reminded you of childhood, big families laughing loudly on the sidewalks. My daughter, who works in business consulting, had clients out there. It was a neighborhood full of stories. But what did Sarah have to do with East Boston? And why was Raphael wrapped up in it? Was it a secret meeting? Later that same day, I ran into Karen Walsh at the campus cafe. She was also in the evening program, around my age, sharp-eyed, with a biting sense of humor. "Patty, you look like you're solving a murder," she joked, flicking the lid of her latte with one finger. I let out a weak laugh. "It's just something weird I saw." She looked over her glasses at me. "If it's about Sarah, be careful. She's untouchable around here. But no one's perfect." I stayed silent, but her words stuck in my mind. Untouchable? Then why did she look so scared? The note with the East Boston address sat in my purse for days, folded neatly but heavy as a stone. I kept telling myself it was none of my business, that Sarah had every right to live her life. But the truth? I was torn between the friend who wanted to protect her and the grown woman who could tell when someone was walking into trouble. Friday night, I found myself typing the address into Google Maps. It was a small community center, tucked in the heart of the neighborhood, surrounded by Latin stores and a church I'd visited years ago with my daughter. I closed the laptop. It wasn't my place. But by Saturday at 6:30 p.m., I was standing at a bus stop in a light coat, my heart pounding. I just wanted to understand. I just needed to make sure Sarah was okay. East Boston welcomed me with the smell of empanadas and music drifting from open windows. The community center was lit up. From inside, I heard voices, laughter, a guitar playing. A sign announced a youth volunteer meeting. I stepped in slowly, trying to look casual. And then I saw her. Sarah was in the middle of the group, handing out papers, smiling, animated. But there was something off in her smile. It looked rehearsed. Next to her stood Raphael. He was talking to an older man, maybe his father, and he seemed less guarded than he had at the university. Lighter, almost human. I ducked behind a rack of flyers, ready to slip out unnoticed. But Sarah saw me. She froze. "Patty?" she said, walking across the room. "What are you doing here?" I stammered. "I saw the address, the note. I thought maybe you were in trouble." She stared at me for a second, surprised. Then she let out a deep breath. "I think we need to talk." She led me into a small room filled with posters and the smell of stale coffee. She sat down across from a cluttered desk and rubbed her face. "It's not an affair," she said before I could say a word. "Raphael is my son." I froze. The air left the room. "Your son?" She nodded. "It happened when I was 19. I wasn't ready. His father disappeared the moment he found out, and Raphael's grandparents, good people, humble but kind, they offered to help. They said they could raise him like their own, said he didn't have to know, that I could still visit, still be there, but move on, go to school, work." She paused, her eyes glassy. "Back then, I thought it was the best choice, and for a while, it was. I'd visit on weekends, bring gifts, take him to the park. He called me Aunt Sarah. I was there for every birthday, every report card. But never as his mother. Not really. I didn't know what to say. My heart hurt, for her, for Raphael. Then came opportunities. An internship out of state, grad school. And when I came back, I landed the job at the university. I needed that job, Patty. More than you know. My family never had stability. I worked hard to get here." She took a breath. "And then I met my husband. He was wonderful, but very traditional. He talked about children like it was a future blueprint, planned, timed, perfect. I never told him. I didn't think I had to. I thought, one day I'd tell Raphael too. But time passed. He grew older, started asking questions. 2 years ago, he confronted me. It was awful. He was angry, rightfully. And now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Now he's trying to forgive me, she said. This community center project? It was his idea, a way to include me, to test if I'm trustworthy, to rebuild something we never truly had. She rubbed her hands, nervous. But if the university finds out, I could lose my job. There's a conduct clause. No unauthorized involvement with students or outside projects. And Raphael? He doesn't want to be known as the hidden son of a university coordinator. He just wants to be himself. We sat in silence for a while. Why tell me all this now? I asked. Because you showed up. Because you saw. And because I trust you, Patty. Because I see in you the strength I've tried to hide in myself all these years. I left that night with my heart heavy. Sarah wasn't perfect, but there was love in every one of her choices, even the hardest ones. She had sacrificed so much, and yet here she was, trying to make things right. In the days that followed, something shifted between us. Our friendship became quieter, but stronger. It was like there was now an invisible bridge between our secrets. I didn't tell a soul. Not Karen, not James. And on a rainy morning, when Sarah handed me a campus festival sign-up form with a shy smile, I understood. Life is made of hard decisions, but also new beginnings, and I was ready to write mine, starting now. That week felt different. The campus, usually buzzing with hurried footsteps and scattered conversations, was wrapped in a strange, tense silence. Something hung in the air, and I could feel it. On Wednesday, after a late-night class on sustainable structures, I saw Raphael leaning against a low wall near the exit, alone, arms crossed, eyes distant. When he noticed me, he tried to smile, but it barely reached his lips. I walked over, cautiously. "Hey, Patty, got a minute?" I nodded, surprised. He walked beside me to a stone bench under a tree, still clinging to its golden autumn leaves. We sat. "Have you ever felt like your whole life was built on something you didn't really understand?" He began, voice low. I looked at him, but stayed silent. I waited. I grew up with my dad's parents. They told me my mom was too young, and that it was better this way. She used to visit on weekends. They called her Aunt Sarah, but she cried every time she left, and I knew something wasn't right. My heart ached for him, but I kept quiet. They loved me. They were good people. But when I turned 15, she just stopped coming. She sent a letter saying I should focus on school, on life, that she needed to follow her own path. I never saw her again. He looked at me, eyes glassy. Now she's here, and no one knows who I am to her. She doesn't even seem to want them to know. I tried to speak, but my throat tightened. Raphael took a deep breath. I always knew she was my mom. I just never understood why it had to be a secret. Why all the silence? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every word he said echoed like a silent scream. And the worst part? I understood both sides. Sarah's pain, the protective silence, the fear of loss, and Raphael's emptiness, left to piece together a story that had always been hidden from him. The next day, I went looking for Sarah. She was in her office, back turned, organizing folders. I knocked. "Come in, Patty." I stepped inside, slowly. "You need to talk to him." She froze, stood still for a second that felt far too long. Then she turned, eyes red. "He knows?" "Not everything, but enough to stop pretending he's in the dark, and so do you." I stepped closer. "Sarah, he's hurting. You are too. This lie is swallowing both of you." She took a deep breath and ran her hand through her hair. I was young, Patty. Immature. I thought if I gave his custody, I'd have a chance to build a career. They promised he'd have everything and that I could still visit, and for a while it worked. But then, opportunities came. A doctorate, a marriage. I thought it was better not to mix it all. But he was your son. He was. He still is. She sat down, defeated. I've carried this for over 20 years. The pain, the guilt, the shame. I always told myself I'd tell him one day, but it never felt like the right moment. And when I saw him here, on campus, as a student, I panicked. I just wanted to protect him, protect everything. I reached out and held her hand. Maybe now is the moment. She nodded silently, but the rumors had already started. At the campus cafe, Karen pulled me aside. "Patty, be careful. People are whispering about Sarah. saying she's having an affair with a student, that he visits her office at weird hours. My stomach dropped. You know how these places are. If this becomes a formal complaint, she could lose everything. By the end of the day, Raphael was waiting for me outside. He didn't say anything. We just walked together. Did she talk about me? He asked suddenly. I nodded. He stopped. So, it's true. It always was. There was silence. She said she was afraid. Afraid of losing everything. And maybe of losing you. He gave a bitter laugh. She already lost me. She just doesn't know it yet. My chest tightened. I knew that pain would leave a mark on all of them. Friday night, I returned to campus to drop off some material. I found Sarah in the projection room where we used to rehearse our presentations. She was sitting in the dark, staring at the blank screen. I think someone saw me with him yesterday. An assistant sent me a screenshot. We're at the door of my office. It looks intimate. We sat in silence. The dean's office called me in for a disciplinary meeting. Monday. Sarah, are you going to tell them? She took a deep breath. I don't have a choice anymore, Patty. Maybe this is the price of trying to hide the most real love I've ever felt in my life. She turned to me, her face lit only by the faint blue glow of the projector. I think it's time everyone knows who I really am. And I knew in that moment that the storm was coming. But I also knew that after the storm comes rebuilding. And maybe, just maybe, this time, the truth would finally bring her the freedom she had never dared to seek. Monday morning came with gray skies, those thick clouds that feel like a mirror to what's going on inside you. And I knew, for Sarah, there was no turning back. When I got to campus, everything seemed far too normal. Students with earbuds, coffee, cups in hand, casual chatter floating in the air. But the tension was there, just under the surface. A scandal waiting to explode, just one click, one wrong word, one confirmation away. Down the hall near the administration office, I saw Sarah from a distance. A modest blouse, her hair pulled tightly into a bun, a folder clutched in her trembling hands. She wasn't looking at anyone. But as she passed me, our eyes met. And for a moment, I didn't see the professor or the strong woman everyone knew. I saw the mother. She stepped into the boardroom where 3 academic board members and the dean were waiting. The door shut with a dry final click. I sat outside on one of those cold wooden benches and waited. The minutes dragged by, endless. A few people walked past, whispering. Some gave me curious glances. I wanted to shout that none of them knew a thing, that none of them had the right. Almost an hour later, the door opened. Sarah walked out, her face unreadable, but her eyes wet. She looked around, saw me still sitting there, and walked over. They gave me 5 days off while they investigate. Did you tell them? I did. She sighed. Told them he's my son, showed documents, talked about all those years, when I was just Aunt Sarah. They listened. But I have no idea what happens now. We sat in silence. The sound of dry leaves blowing in the wind was the only thing between us. He needs to hear it from you, I said. I know. What no one expected was the students' reaction. As soon as the university made its statement, the hallways came, back to life. Messages of support started appearing on bulletin boards, across social media, and on handmade posters taped to the walls. We stand with you, Professor Sarah. Truth teaches, too. Women supporting women. It was as if a wave of collective empathy had swept through the campus. Many students, especially women, wrote open letters, shared personal stories, and cried together, not out of sadness, but out of relief, pride, and the feeling that someone was still brave enough to fight. Seeing Sarah stand tall, without bowing her head, sparked a quiet but powerful movement. She was no longer just a respected professor, she had become a symbol of courage. And as paradoxical as it may seem, it was in revealing her vulnerability that she touched so many hearts. That night, I couldn't sleep. Alone in the kitchen, with a lukewarm cup of tea in my hands, I sent Raphael a message. I hesitated before typing. I didn't want to intrude, but I had to try. So I wrote. Nothing formal, nothing rehearsed. Just a simple message, straight from the heart. I told him I was here for him, that he could talk whenever he wanted, no pressure, no expectations, that sometimes silence is its own way of coping. I imagined him as one of my own sons. I told him Sarah had been brave enough to finally speak the truth to the university, and that sooner or later, everyone there would know that she loved him, even if she hadn't always known how to show it. Not long after, he replied. He didn't say much, didn't open up completely, but he acknowledged it. It was a start, and at the end of that short exchange, he sent a heart emoji, a small symbol, but it held all the hope of what might still be rebuilt between them. Later, already in bed, I picked up the phone and called Daniel, my oldest. He's been living abroad for months now, and sometimes it feels like he's on another planet. The call took a while to connect. Hey, Mom, everything okay? Yes, I just wanted to hear your voice. Silence on the other end. Then, is everything really okay? It is. I just miss you. Do you know what it's like to look at a child your whole life and then see him become a man on the other side of the world? He chuckled, soft and warm. I'm still your boy. Yes, and you always will be. I paused. I love you. You know? I love you too, Mom. So much. I hung up with a tightness in my chest. I felt the same urge to say that to all of my children. I hugged myself under the covers as if I could warm the ache from within. In that moment, everything made more sense. What Sarah was trying to reclaim, what Raphael still couldn't understand, that was it. This invisible thread that ties mother and child, that survives time, pain, and every wrong decision. The next day, Sarah asked to meet with Raphael. She asked me to come too, for support. The three of us sat in a quiet corner of the old library, surrounded by tall shelves and the scent of old paper. She started slowly. You have every right to hate me, Raphael. I messed up. I hid behind excuses. But you were the most beautiful thing that ever happened to me. I just didn't know how to make that fit with everything I thought I had to be. Raphael didn't respond, just listened. I'm not asking you to forgive me now. I just want you to know, if I could go back, I would have held your hand every day. At every school play, through every fever, for every dream you had. And I wasn't there. I failed you. His eyes filled. But if one day you want to, I'm still here, as your mother. For real. He looked at her. A heavy silence filled the space. Then he spoke, quietly. I don't know if I can call you that. Not yet. Sarah nodded. That's okay. I'll wait. He hesitated, then reached out his hand. Sarah took it. And in that small gesture, a bridge was built. Maybe a fragile one, but real. When I finally had a moment alone at home, I collapsed onto the living room couch, exhausted. The weight of the entire week pressed down on my shoulders like a heavy coat I couldn't shrug off. I knew I had to tell James everything that was going on, but the words didn't come easy. He walked in, gently closed the door behind him, and sat down beside me, looking at me as if he could see straight into my soul. Patty, you've been distant. What's going on? His voice was steady, but filled with concern. I took a deep breath, trying to summon the courage. It's Sarah and her husband, Judge Philip. James raised an eyebrow. Philip Bennett? He always seemed like the unshakable type. What happened? Sarah told me the truth about Raphael, that he's her son, that she gave custody to his grandparents because she couldn't raise him, because she was trying to build her career, and because she was afraid of losing everything she had with Philip. My voice wavered. I could feel her pain as if it were my own. James stayed quiet for a few moments, then spoke softly. Do you think Philip can accept it? He was disappointed. She said she felt it in the way he looked at her. Cold, distant. He had no idea until now. I sighed, shrinking under the weight of it all. But he's trying to understand. Trying to support her, even through the shock. They never had children, James. Maybe this could be a new beginning. But it's all so fragile. He took my hands, holding them tight. And you, Patty? What do you want? I paused. I want you to really be here with me. Not let me drown in this silence I've built around myself. I need you, now more than ever. He pulled me into his arms, and in that moment, I knew. I wasn't alone. The next day, I saw Sarah and Philip talking in one of the university's private rooms. He'd been called to give a statement about his wife. They wanted his version of things. The tension between them was thick. She spoke quietly, trying to explain her choices, her fear, her sorrow. He listened, rigid, his face unreadable. You should have trusted me from the start, he said finally. It wasn't just the truth you kept from me, Sarah. It was fear that built this wall between us. She lowered her head, eyes brimming with tears. I was lost. I didn't know how to face it all. I didn't want to lose you. Philip sighed, his eyes softening, though the wound was still raw. I want to meet Raphael. I want to understand this part of your life you kept hidden. Maybe this is the start of something new for us. As I watched them, I thought about my own life. How many times had fear steered our choices, keeping us from the truth? And how the truth, however painful, might actually be the first step toward healing. That night, I wrote to Sarah. I told her how much I admired her, how strong she was, even in the storm. I said she inspired me, that she could count on me. Always. Because in the end, no matter the silences or the fear, there's always room for a new beginning. The semester ended like a collective sigh across campus. Hallways that had been filled with hurried footsteps were now empty, voices quiet. It was the start of summer break, and for me, the close of a long, intense chapter. I presented my final project with nerves stretched thin, but I walked out of that room with a shy smile and the glow of someone who had given their best. James was waiting for me outside, holding a bouquet of flowers. Simple, but beautiful, and with a different look in his eyes, like he finally truly saw me. I hugged him right there in the hallway and whispered, "Thank you for being here, for not letting me give up." He smiled and quietly said, "I'm proud of you, so proud." The grades came a few days later, higher than I expected. I finally felt like I belonged there, not just as a student, but as a woman who, even with children, marriage, and the daily grind, could still start over. That same week, we got the university's decision about Sarah's case. The committee closed the investigation based on documents, testimonies, and a voluntary psychological evaluation Sarah herself had done. There was no concrete evidence of professional misconduct with students or abuse of her position. What happened was, above all, a deep personal conflict, misunderstood and never properly resolved. The university chose not to expose her publicly, considering her long career as a respected professor, her academic commitment, and the emotional sensitivity involved. Sarah wouldn't lose her job. Instead, she would receive a formal letter of reprimand, not for the past itself, but for hiding the truth, which could have avoided misunderstandings. Additionally, she was invited to participate in an internal program for psychological support and rebuilding relationships, especially with her department colleagues. The decision caused whispers in the hallways, of course, but to me, it felt fair. No one came out unscathed, but no one was erased. Sarah called me as soon as she heard. "Patty, I just wanted it all to end. But I think this isn't a story that ends. It's one that's just beginning. Her voice trembled, but there was hope. Philip and Raphael will meet tomorrow, she went on. I don't know what will happen, but Philip wants to understand. He wants to try. I stayed silent for a few seconds, feeling a wave of emotion wash over me. Sarah had been my friend for so long, and seeing her fight to rebuild her story, even after years of silence, was a lesson in courage. I'm with you, I said. It's going to be okay. Somehow, it will. That afternoon, my youngest son came back from his trip. That typical happy family chaos filled the house again. Suitcases on the floor, loud laughter, the smell of coffee and cake, voices mixing in the kitchen. My 3 kids were finally all together, and I realized how much I missed that presence. Even when they fight, even when we disagree, they are mine. Always will be. My oldest pulled me aside while the others talked loudly in the living room. Mom, I saw you're doing well at school. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you, okay? I was speechless. I just hugged her. And in that hug, something inside me shifted. That night, we all sat at the table. Me, James, Jessica, Lucas. Even Olivia, who's usually late, showed up early this time. Laughter, stories, an impromptu toast with soda. A simple moment, but full of meaning. Later, after everyone was asleep, I sat on the porch with James. The night breeze was soft and the sky clear. He handed me a cup of tea and stayed quiet for a while before saying, "We still have a lot of life to live together, don't we?" "We do," I replied, "but now in a different way. Without fear of change, without fear of growing." He nodded and kissed my forehead. The next morning, I got one last message from Sarah. "I don't know what the future holds, but I'm at peace. Thank you for everything, Patty. Really." I closed my phone slowly. For the first time in a long time, I felt we were all exactly where we were meant to be, starting over, with wounds still healing, but hearts open to what lies ahead. I don't know what will happen with Sarah and Philip. I don't even know how the meeting with Raphael will go. But I know she's willing. I know Philip wants to understand. And for now, that's all that matters. As for me, I still have a lot to discover. But I no longer carry that emptiness I had in the beginning. I've become whole again, mother, woman, student, friend. I've chosen myself once more, and looking at my full house, my united family, and my story falling into place, I can only say one thing. It's never too late. Not to tell the truth, not to be heard, and not to start again. Thank you for listening.